And here we have Richard Campbell from Canada.
Hi.
And obviously we're in Hong Kong. You
yes.
can tell this, right?
You're making land as we speak.
Oh yeah, it's the characteristics of Hong Kong.
That's very cool,
right?
Actually.
So Richard, you've been in the industry for quite a while, right? So how has the industry evolved, like, say back from 30 years ago to now?
So you read my bio, you know, I wrote my first line of code in 1977.
Right.
For better or worse. So if you went back 30 years, so that would be 1982. So what do I remember about 1982? The IBM PC was brand new. It had just come out.
Okay.
It was about $5,000 for 2 floppy drives. It initially shipped with CPM. MS-DOS actually came a little later, and I remember looking at, I was a CPM guy then, that's how you made a living.
Right.
Green screens, I was programming in DBase 2, with the 8088 processor. I had a bunch of S100 bus machines. One of them was the North Star Horizon. So I had more of those than I had IBM PCs. The PCs were just starting out then. And you know, the Apple II was relatively new. VisiCalc was the product of the day, the first sort of real spreadsheet. Lotus 123 was brand new then. You know, these were just the beginning of the real personal computer as a business tool. That's in 82, that was all just getting started. And it was exciting times, but it was very simple. You know, dot matrix and daisy wheel printers, and acoustic modems were coming. They were even new then. That was right at the edge of all of that. So you know, that's pretty rarefied, basic software. 64K of RAM was more than anybody was ever going to need.
And then the next decade,
jump up to 92. So what do we have? What's happening in 92? Windows is brand new. The mouse has just come out. I didn't like Windows because I was really good on the keyboard. You know, at that point I've already got 10, 12
You want your
years
hands off the keyboard.
Taking your hands off the keyboard
something else, right?
But you know the big thing that was important about Windows, the thing that made me go, okay, now we need to use this, was this concept of device context. You know, that the operating system owned the drivers instead of the programs. So Lotus Symphony, the sort of mature version of Lotus that came with a database product and a word processing product and so forth, Symphony, it was like 5 1/4 disks for the program and 30 driver disks. So you had to, when you were picking the software to put on your IBM PC, it depended on what expansion cards you had and what video card you had as to what programs would run. And so Windows took that problem away. Windows said, we will run all the drivers for that, and your programs just work within Windows. And the product that got me hooked was WinFax. Because now I could fax from my computer the same way you printed. And that was the day I said, okay, I'll use a mouse. And I watched that work. That was like a profound change for me. So, okay, that makes sense. So I was programming still in DBase, but there was the newer, later version stuff like Clipper and Fox Pro. And I just going to start with Access in the first versions of Visual Basic. So back then, in 92, that's the beginnings of the GUI programming environments.
Then comes the .com era.
2002, holy, well, .com's already come and gone at that point. You know, I made a living as a consultant working with .com companies from about 97 onward, but the bubble burst in 2000, 2001. So by 2002 was kind of a tough time, but the machines were so much more advanced. You know, the PC price had really started to fall at this point. You know, the $1,000 PC was the norm. I think one of the things that came out of the .com boom was this idea that you don't have to replace your hardware every 18 months. That it was now fast enough that you weren't getting anything for new hardware. You know, that's really the beginning of that. Today, that's absolutely prevalent. But in the 2001, 2002 is when you first started seeing IT departments going, well, this stuff works.
You don't have to replace your computers every few months.
Yeah, that doesn't matter anymore, you know, because it's just not advancing that much. The Pentium had sort of peaked up and come back down, and we'd actually lost speed on the processor because it didn't need to go faster. It wasn't worth it. You know, those are the kinds of changes that happened in 2002. It was a very interesting market. And of course, the internet was now becoming dominant. This was the way we were going to do things. Nobody would consider on a computer that wasn't connected to other computers. It's just the way you work. Everybody's got email everywhere. You know, in '92, the internet still wasn't public, right? It was only between the universities. We had to steal connectivity to the university and to the internet if we wanted to use it. But by 2002, it was everywhere. It was completely dominant. That's a massive jump for 10 years.
Right. And now it's the cloud era, right?
Oh, well, you hit it, right? What is the logical evolution of the internet is let's take those services off these machines, stop building those data centers we don't need. You know, my talks here have been largely about using Studio to manage large-scale websites, to deal with diagnostics, makes things work well, how do you scale your sites out?
Right.
And you have to end every one of those conversations with, or you do this in the cloud and it's not as hard.
Right.
You
I
know?
mean, yeah. And I mean, think of this, like, imagine it's so much handier now, right? If you want to reinstall your operating system, your machines, right? Instead of, finding, downloading all the programs again, right? You just get it back from the cloud, right?
It's there right away. Well, the classic one for me, I was doing this exchange with the audience. We were talking about, well, how much equipment do you need? You provision your website when you're building your own hardware for peak load.
Right.
And that peak load is an hour a day. So the rest of the time, a bunch of that hardware you paid for is really not necessary. And the cloud allows us to be elastic.
Mm-hmm.
Actually add instances as the load goes up, take those instances away, and only pay for what you use.
Just like Windows Azure, right?
Yeah.
Scalability.
Well, we've always had scalability. For skilled people, you can scale it yourself.
Right.
The real thing here is, because you have to provision for the maximum, you spend a lot of money for stuff you don't use all the time.
Right.
With cloud, because I pay as I go and I only pay for what I use, I scale it up and scale it down every day. That's amazing. That's a very profound
Dynamic
shift.
scaling.
Yeah, elasticity for me is the word, right? I want an elastic system. It grows as needed, goes down when not needed. We're going to do a big campaign this weekend. I'm going to provision up.
Mm-hmm.
And when the weekend's over, we'll provision back down. You just can't do that yourself. There's no other way to do it.
Yeah. So how has the .NET community evolved throughout these years?
Well, you sort of hit the window right on there,
Mm-hmm.
right? 2002 is the very beginning of .NET.
Right.
2001, 2002, we got the first bits,
Mm-hmm.
and 2012, now 10 years later, it's a mature product. It's important to remember that span, that 10, 11 years, is longer than Visual Basic even existed.
It is.
It was 8 years end to end, right?
Right,
92
right.
to 2000, and then it was over. And here we've been going 10, 11 years. So .NET is a mature platform, no two ways about it. But it's interesting to see how it's evolved too. People are occasionally afraid. They talk about the death of .NET. I'm like, that's crazy talk. It's never going away. If anything, Windows 8 has painted this great path forward. Where you really have 3 development stacks that are about equal. The .NET folks, and C#, and then you've got C++. Now, for the first time ever, has access to the XAML stack in a good way. And then HTML5, CSS3, and the Chakra engine, the JavaScript engine, also have access to WinRT.
Right.
So I think that's an interesting time, just to see that diversity all working against the same underlying
And the UI is getting more human, right?
Oh, and much more evolved. I think touch is interesting, but also gesture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if touch is just a whistle stop on the way to tablets that have 3D cameras, and you'll just be able to not even touch them, but motion in front of them. The Kinect is so compelling. We're at a crazy time at UIs. But I think there's bigger topics on the server end as well. The evolution of the Intel processor and the ARM processor to multi-core to stop going faster and start having more. They're still maintaining Moore's law. They're doubling the density every 18 months or so. They're just not making faster and faster cores. There's just lots of cores. So, as programmers, we have to evolve our languages and our tools to match the hardware we're getting. And the hardware is very different. You look at the hardware of 2002, when .NET first came out, there was Pentiums. It was 1 core. Right. 1 gig, 2 gigs of RAM. Now in 2012, you almost can't buy a machine with less than 4 cores in it. And 4 gigs, 8 gigs, 16 gigs of RAM, it's just a different world. Right. So, given that, we have to change the way we program. We have to presume multiprocessing all the time. We need to use this async and await approaches to everything is asynchronous so that it's free-flowing threads. You see the kernel itself inside of Windows has evolved. It does things differently because it's dealing with all of these cores all the time. And even if you are running your own hardware, you're running in the cloud, that programming approach works better for scaling up and for utilizing the more advanced hardware we've got.
The elasticity, the dynamic scaling, right? All that with cloud, right?
Absolutely, and that's the whole thing is where the owner, you've got to program the same way no matter where you run it. It's got to be able to work. But I think it's a challenge for us as developers to start thinking in terms of how that hardware is different, and these new features are really about utilizing that hardware more effectively. But I think you're at an interesting time here where 2002 there wasn't a lot of difference between a server machine and a workstation machine. They were very, very similar, and they have diverged over the past 10 years. system now. Server hardware with large numbers of cores, none of that UI stuff, available in the cloud, that's sort of the private cloud, public cloud model, versus the UI concepts now with different kinds of screens, with gesture, with tablets, and touch, very, very different kinds of hardware now. So I think it's a fun time to be a programmer. You can pick different directions to go in, and everything is evolving at once.
Yeah, it's so easy to code these days, right, with all the newest products, right?
Yeah, it depends on how far on the edge you want to be. I mean, the mature tools are great, and you know, we know our way around those things, but living in WinRT is still a challenge. That's very new, very raw. You know, we just got the consumer preview, and we're trying new things, but there are great opportunities there to try.
Well, cool. A lot of information from Richard Campbell today. Thanks. Yeah, definitely a lot to expect from this industry in the future, right? So say hi to our HK folks, and
hi Hong Kong.
Yeah,
thanks very much.
Richard will be going back to Vancouver. See you soon back there.
You bet.
Bye.